Most women don't leave all at once. They unravel, quietly, without fanfare or fury. The world thinks she's still there, sitting in the same room, breathing the same air. But inside, her soul has already folded its wings and flown far from the chaos that once fed it. And the man who watches her with distant eyes, he doesn't yet realize that something sacred has been lost. Not because she shouted, but because she went silent. What would you think if I told you that her solitude, her quiet vanishing, was not weakness, but initiation? That in the void where she once screamed to be seen, she has now become the witness of her own becoming. That where once she needed your recognition, now she only listens to the ancient rhythm of her own breath. And in that silence, the soul of Epictetus echoes, "No man is free who is not master of himself." He thought she was fragile, that her tenderness meant dependency. But her silence wasn't submission, it was sovereignty. She had to leave the room, even if her body hadn't yet followed. Because when a woman finally learns to sit alone with her ache, she meets the unspoken truth. No one is coming to rescue her, and no one is coming to ruin her. And in that terrifying stillness, something shifts. You may not have noticed the day it began. She still made the coffee, still responded to your distracted questions, still smiled, though the smile stopped reaching her eyes. But one day, while folding clothes or brushing her hair, she whispered to herself, "I am not here to be consumed by a man who has not faced himself." And though she was still beside you, she had already stepped out of the role you cast her in. This was never about revenge, never about theatrics. This is archetypal. This is the feminine soul returning to herself after centuries of projection. Jung would call it the withdrawal of anima, the moment when a man must see that the woman is not his mirror, but his challenge. And Epictetus would ask, "Do you wish to win all things? Then govern yourself." The man, of course, does not understand this at first. He sees her physical body, assumes presence, but what he's really encountering is a shell. Her essence now lives somewhere beyond reach, in a sanctuary of silence he can no longer enter. Because for years, he may have mistaken her nurturing for passivity, her patience for pliability. But when a woman has been ignored long enough, something ancient awakens in her, a fire that no longer begs to be warmed by someone else's cold. Now, the room is still, but not empty. It is filled with the weight of all the things never said. And you, yes you, are left with the echo of your own avoidance. She has stopped trying to teach you with words. Because a man only understands the value of presence when he has first tasted the abyss of absence. She is not punishing you. She is purifying herself, of you, of the self that tried too long to please you, of the illusions that wrapped her identity in your affection. Now, alone, she is remembering what it feels like to belong to herself, to rise not in rebellion, but in reclamation. And this is where the story turns, not into a tragedy, but a test for him. For the masculine that must finally confront the shadow it has cast onto the feminine for lifetimes. He cannot charm his way out of this. He cannot argue her back into submission. No, if he is to meet her again, it will not be from the pedestal of dominance, but from the ground of humility. Only now, in her absence, does he begin to feel it. The mirror cracking, the illusion dissolving. He starts to see not only what she was, but what he wasn't. And the pain that rises in his chest is not from her leaving. It is from realizing he never truly arrived, that he spent years in proximity without presence, mistaking possession for partnership. The Stoics would call this the moment of awakening, when a man begins to examine not what he has lost, but who he has become, when he no longer seeks to control, but to understand, not to reclaim her, but to reclaim himself. But by then, she is already elsewhere, in the forest of her soul, in the temple of her quiet, drinking from her own depth, no longer asking to be seen, because she has seen herself. And in that stillness, the woman is no longer reacting, she is remembering. Not the version of herself that bent to earn love, nor the one who swallowed silence to keep the peace, but the one who existed long before anyone taught her to measure her worth by another's recognition. The ancient feminine, the sovereign force beneath centuries of compromise, has returned. She walks now, not to be followed, but to be free. Each step away from him is a step inward toward the core of her essence. The child in her no longer cries for validation. The maiden no longer dances for approval. Even the mother archetype, who once nurtured and forgave endlessly, has grown tired of raising men who won't raise themselves. What remains is the woman as oracle, not bitter, but boundless, not cold, but clear. Her solitude is not exile, it is alchemy. For only in solitude can she hear the truth that the noise of partnership once drowned. And here is what it says: you were never too much. You were never not enough. You were simply never truly seen. And so she does not rage. She does not beg. She does not curse his name. Because she understands now, those who are blind to their own soul cannot possibly see yours. He, meanwhile, has begun to wrestle with the emptiness she left behind. But it is not her absence that haunts him. It is the mirror she took away. The mirror in which he once saw his goodness reflected through her adoration. Without her, he is left with himself, unfiltered, unadored, unfinished. And for the first time, the fortress of ego begins to tremble. What once passed as confidence now reveals itself as arrogance. What once posed as leadership now exposes its foundation of fear. He sees the ways he avoided his own depths by hiding in her warmth. And now, that warmth is gone, not as a punishment, but as an invitation to enter his own cold. This is where the Stoic path begins, not in glory, but in grief. Not in domination, but discipline. Epictetus did not teach men to control women. He taught them to govern the only thing they ever truly possessed: their own mind, their own reactions, their own desires. And so, the man must now ask, what have I truly built within myself when the woman is no longer there to soothe what I refuse to face? He may try to distract himself, another woman, another goal, another drink, but none of it touches the void. Because this wound was not caused by her, it was only revealed by her departure. And deep within, he knows it. The pain is not because she left, it is because she saw him fully and chose to walk away. What is masculinity then, without power over? It is presence. It is protection, not of her, but of one's own integrity. The man who begins this journey will be forced to walk the underworld of his own shadow. He will confront the ghosts of boys inside him who still crave a mother, still fear rejection, still mistake control for love. And it is only in that descent that he begins to rise, not to win her back. No, that is not the aim. The aim is to become a man who no longer needs to lose a woman in order to find himself. Meanwhile, the woman does not wait. She does not pause her evolution to see if he will catch up. She moves with the wind, anchored in her own rhythm. There is no performance here, no revenge fantasy. Her liberation is not a show. it is sacred. She has not become hard, she has become whole, and wholeness does not beg. Her softness now is not an invitation, it is a boundary. It is not for the uninitiated. It is not for the man who sees her as a solution to his own fragmentation. The woman who has done her own inner work does not long for a man who is afraid of doing his. She may desire him. She may even love him, but she will not shrink for him. You, yes you, have to decide. Will you rise into the fullness of who you are? Will you strip away the masks, the egoic stories, the layers of false self? Or will you keep chasing reflections of comfort, resenting the women who no longer allow themselves to be your mirror? The Stoics spoke not of conquest, but of control, self-control, and the one who cannot govern his impulse to dominate, to deflect, to demand, is no Stoic. He is a boy in the armor of a man. But life, if it is merciful, will strip him of that armor, as she has stripped away her need to be chosen. Now she chooses herself, her peace, her path, and you are left with the question, will you follow not her, but the truth she revealed? There is a moment, rare, fleeting, when a man sees not just what he lost, but why he was never able to hold it. This moment is sacred. It arrives not in the noise of pursuit, but in the silence of reckoning. No text message will reach her. No confession will return her. Because what she required was never words, it was transformation. And this is the chasm that yawns open in the masculine psyche, the realization that love cannot be kept by possession, nor commanded by charm. It must be earned in the fires of self-honesty. She was never asking for perfection, only presence. But presence requires pain, and pain requires courage, the kind of courage he spent years avoiding under the mask of confidence. He remembers now the small moments, her eyes dimming during conversations, the way she stopped asking for attention, stopped initiating touch, the way her laughter, once unguarded and full, became measured, filtered. She didn't fall out of love. She fell out of illusion. And into the truth of his absence, emotional, spiritual, psychological, and now, all the things he dismissed as overreactions stand before him as evidence, not of her drama, but of his detachment. You see, this is where the male ego often crumbles, not in public defeat, but in private reflection. When the noise fades, when the woman is no longer there to absorb the weight of his unprocessed fears, when he looks into the quiet and realizes, she was never the problem, she was the mirror. Epictetus said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. And what more potent provocation is there than a woman withdrawing her light after years of trying to illuminate a man's inner world? Now, the man faces a choice that no one else will witness. He can chase another woman to recreate the illusion of validation, or he can sit, still, in the cave of himself, and listen to the echoes of all the moments he abandoned his own becoming. This is the descent, the dark night, the soul's winter, where every false layer dies, where every unspoken truth screams for acknowledgement. The world won't notice this war, but it is the most important war he will ever fight. Not against her absence, against his own refusal to feel, to be responsible, to grow. And what of her? She has entered a different time zone altogether, where clocks no longer tick according to anyone else's urgency, where she no longer explains her silence or apologizes for her boundaries. She has tasted her own depth, and it is enough. She does not need a man who begs for another chance. She needs a man who has changed in her absence. who understands that she was not the fire that burned him, but the light that exposed what was already broken. Do you understand this? Her solitude is not punishment. It is rebirth. Her distance is not cruelty. It is clarity. She did not break the bond. She broke the illusion. And in doing so, she offered you the most brutal and beautiful gift a woman can offer a man, the chance to see himself, but only if he's willing to look. This is the secret most never tell. The woman who leaves doesn't always stop loving, but she stops betraying herself in the name of love. And that difference is everything. It's what makes her power untouchable, her silence unshakable. The Stoics taught that nothing external can disturb the soul unless the soul allows it. And so she has taken back her permission, her energy, her open hands. Now her hands are full of her own worth, her own rhythm, her own becoming. And what becomes of the man? That is yet to be written, because the woman's departure is not the end of his story. It is the beginning of his initiation. No woman can complete it for him. No apology will shortcut the work. No performance will substitute the pain. If he is to rise, it will be because he chose to bleed into truth rather than bleed into blame. He will need to enter the wound without armor, to sit in the place where her eyes once looked at him with hope, and see who he was when he let that gaze fall away. And from that place, he may begin again. There is a silence a man enters after loss, not the quiet of absence, but the silence of confrontation. Here, in the hollow where her presence once lived, he meets the ghosts of his unspoken fears. The boy who needed to be adored to feel worthy. The man who mistook dominance for direction. The father who was never present. The mother who never looked deeply enough. All of it floods in. This is not romantic grief. It is spiritual reckoning. He begins to see her not as the cause of his suffering, but as its revealer. Her departure was not betrayal. It was truth refusing to be silenced any longer. And the truth is this: no woman can fill the hole a man refuses to name. She can cradle it, soften it, sing to it, but she cannot mend what he denies. That task is his alone. So he starts to dismantle the fortress, the sarcasm that shielded his vulnerability, the emotional distance that passed for independence, the ambition that masked his abandonment. He peels it back, layer by layer, with trembling hands, not because he wants to win her back, but because he is finally ready to meet himself in the mirror of rawness. And it is here, in this sacred breakdown, that something begins to awaken, not performance, but presence. Not the image of a man, but the substance of one. He doesn't need to speak it yet. In fact, words would only pollute it. This transformation is not loud. It is quiet, stoic, enduring. He studies the teachings of those who came before. Epictetus, broken in body, but whole in will, who taught that the external world is neither friend nor foe. It is only fuel for the internal forge. Seneca, who warned that suffering becomes unbearable only when we forget its purpose. Marcus Aurelius, who held an empire in his hand and still knew the weight of a single thought. These men did not flee from pain. They befriended it, shaped themselves by it, found their essence through it. Now the modern man must do the same, not through quotes or affirmations, through discipline, through choice, through humility. And what of the woman, whose footsteps now echo through the corridors of her own soul? She has not become unreachable. She has simply become rooted, no longer seduced by potential, no longer swayed by the hunger in another's eyes. She listens now to a deeper voice, the one that was drowned out when she prioritized others above herself. She is not hardened. She is honed. She wears her softness like a blade now, not for violence, but precision. She no longer bleeds for love. She bleeds only for truth, the kind of truth that cannot be spoken. It must be embodied, and unless a man has met his shadow, he cannot hold her light. He will try to possess it, diminish it, reflect himself through it, but she knows better now. Do you? Because if you are listening, if something in you stirs, not from guilt but from awakening, then you are already on the path, not to win her, but to reclaim you. You begin to see that power was never in how many listened to you, admired you, followed you. Real power is the ability to sit in your own chaos and not flinch, to feel the grief she awakened and not numb it, to watch your projections dissolve and not reach for new ones. You realize that she, in her solitude, became what you feared most, free, not from you, but from the version of herself that needed you to see her. And now, she sees herself, entirely, radically. And no man, no matter how articulate, can unsee what she has seen in her own soul. She no longer fears being alone. In fact, solitude is now her sanctuary. Her quiet is not loneliness, it is luxury. And from that stillness, she chooses, not with desperation, not with hope, but with clarity. And you, man who stands in the ashes of your former self, must now choose as well. Will you become worthy not of her return, but of your own presence? Will you rise not in performance, but in purpose? This is the crossroad. You have felt the ache, the longing, the hollow. Now comes the building, stone by stone, practice by practice, thought by thought. This is where the man is forged, not in her arms, in the fire she left behind. He begins to move differently now, not with the bravado of before, but with gravity. His steps are quieter, but more rooted. There is a slowness in him, not hesitation, but intention. Because once a man has faced the truth of his own emptiness, he no longer rushes to fill it. He learns to honor it, to sit with it, to let it teach him. This is the beginning of his strength, not in power over others, but in mastery over himself. And mastery is not glory. It is repetition. It is daily rituals born from silence and sorrow. He starts to rise early, not to dominate the world, but to meet himself before the world intrudes. He reflects, writes, breathes. He listens to his thoughts, his patterns, his inner critic. He studies himself like a sacred text, page by page, not to fix, but to face. For years, he blamed the women who left, the ones who changed, who weren't grateful, who wanted too much. But now, as he peels back the truth, he sees it wasn't what they asked, it's what he withheld, not just from them, but from himself. He withheld his vulnerability because he equated it with weakness. He withheld his presence because it required stillness. He withheld his heart because he never saw it honored in the men before him. So he learned to offer performance instead of presence, protection instead of partnership, control instead of connection. And in doing so, he attracted the same pain he refused to name. But now, the loop is breaking. He is no longer chasing women to feel valuable. He is becoming a man who holds value, whether seen or not, whether loved or left, whether celebrated or alone. This is the Stoic path, to find peace within that no storm can steal, to walk into the world not needing approval, but offering alignment, to love without clinging, to give without losing, to stay grounded even when the heart breaks wide open. He no longer asks, Will she come back? He asks, will I be ready if life brings her, or anyone, back into my orbit? And readiness, he knows now, is not having answers. It is having roots. It is being so anchored in his values, his integrity, his truth, that no external force can make him betray himself again. This is what makes him magnetic. Not the sharpness of his jawline or the cleverness of his tongue, but the softness behind his eyes, the silence beneath his movements, the feeling that this man has been somewhere and returned whole. And the woman? She feels it when he enters the room, not because he demands attention, but because his energy no longer leaks, his presence no longer clings. He has nothing to prove. He does not seek to be seen. He sees. This changes everything, because a woman who has done her own healing is no longer seduced by potential. She is drawn only to resonance. And the man who has faced his inner landscape, his shadows, his wounds, his longings, resonates. She feels it in his stillness. She hears it in his silence. She trusts it, not because he says the right things, but because his energy speaks a language that cannot be faked. But make no mistake, her heart is not an open gate. She is no longer moved by regret. She does not reward effort born from desperation. She honors only devotion born from depth. If he wants to meet her again, not just physically, but soul to soul, he must not bring her roses wrapped in apology. He must bring her the man she once hoped lived inside of him. The one who no longer needs her to heal him, but who has already begun the healing on his own. He must not ask her to return to the past. He must become the future that never existed before. This is not a fairy tale. It is a forging. This is not romance. It is resurrection. She will not meet you in the place you abandoned her. She will meet you only where you found yourself. There comes a day, silent, unmarked, when the man no longer looks back to the moment she left, but forward to the man he has become in her absence. And this is the shift, the sacred turning, when grief ceases to be a punishment and becomes the very clay from which a deeper self is formed. He no longer wears his pain as armor. He wears it as a map, because he understands now. Suffering without reflection is just repetition, but suffering with reflection, that is transformation. And in this, he finally honors what she tried to ignite in him all along, not a need for her, but a return to himself. He stops blaming his father for the anger, his mother for the wound, the women who came before her for the mistrust. He traces the bloodline of his own pain, not to cast judgment, but to carry responsibility, because he knows now there is no freedom without ownership, and no ownership without humility. And humility is no longer a concept. It is the sound of his breath when no one is watching, the moment he chooses to listen instead of defend, the decision to pause instead of project. He does not have to be right anymore. He only has to be real. He begins to speak less. When he does speak, he chooses words like a craftsman, tools for truth, not weapons of ego. He no longer talks about the man he wants to be. He simply begins to be him, in the way he wakes, in the way he shows up for others, in the way he speaks to himself. And if the woman ever sees him again, she will not meet the boy who once sought her approval. She will meet a man who approves of himself, not because he is perfect, but because he has embraced the imperfection so fully it no longer controls him. She may still feel the pain they shared, but she will also feel the absence of blame, the end of the narrative, the quiet of completion. And that is when a woman truly sees him, not as her savior, not as her lost cause, but as a sovereign being walking beside her not out of need, but out of resonance. But you must understand, by then, she no longer needs him either. She has built a life so textured, so tuned to her own rhythm, that a man must bring presence, not disruption, peace, not chaos, purpose, not performance. She is no longer moved by flattery. She is moved by energy, the kind that stands unshaken when she's triggered, the kind that listens when she's silent, the kind that never tries to fix her, because it trusts her power to alchemize her own pain. And if he carries this energy, not as an act, but as a truth, then perhaps, just perhaps, she will let him near again, not to fill a role, not to complete a story, but to write something new. He will not be rewarded for suffering. He will be recognized for rising. And if she chooses to open again, it is not because he convinced her. It is because his growth echoed her own, because the river of his becoming met the river of hers, and they flowed, not into each other, but beside each other. Two sovereigns, no longer halves, no longer rescuer and rescued, just whole beings, walking in truth. And the power he now holds, it is not loud, it is not brash. It is the quiet confidence of a man who fears nothing within himself, and therefore nothing in her. He has made peace with his chaos, and so he no longer fears hers. This is the masculine the world forgot, the masculine reborn not in dominance but in devotion, to truth, to presence, to becoming. And the feminine that meets him, she no longer withholds, she no longer tests, she simply sees. Because the woman who broke free in solitude did not leave to be alone. She left to become whole. And a whole woman only meets a man on the road of his own wholeness. The man who knows this does not chase. He becomes.